Grudgeon, are you okay if I try to engage in a round two situation with Boethius?
Please, please.
Okay. So Boethius, first of all, uh, you know, I want to see this as we're developing our understanding on this together, okay?
Okay.
I've done some preparations after dropping some family members off at the airport.
Ooh.
All right.
Okay.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, right, about your distinction between implied sense and explicit sense of the logos spermaticos, is that
hmm
it is implied in the implied sense one can maintain that someone has the logos spermaticos in them.
A better way to represent the implicit versus explicit distinction is that when I say that someone is implicitly worshiping um, the one true God, all I mean is that specific contents of what they believe in is similar to our God. And in regard to those specific characteristics, they worship the one true God, right? And explicit would just mean in reference to the other contents of their religion, they do not worship the one true God, which is the Holy Trinity, for example, right? So when we say that other religions worship the one true God, right? Or the same true God, all we're referring to is to the implicit side of things, basically the similar characteristics. But in respect to the explicit worship, they do not worship the same God.
So your claim is that insofar as the characteristics are similar, it is implied and not explicit?
Only in that sense, yes, but
Only
is
in
there
what sense?
only in the implicit sense, like only in the sense of those characteristics they worship the same God. The other characteristics which are contrary to divine scripture and revelation would be all under the category of explicit.
What I'm trying to get at, Boethius, is how do you maintain that the idea of God is both implied and explicit?
Right. I think that what's getting you mixed up here is that
Don't no no
when
no
I
don't
say
shift the burden.
I'm not
Just lay out your
shifting,
case. Just lay out
I'm
your
not
case.
shifting, not shifting.
Just
I'm
answer
saying
the
that when
right
I
right.
say
I understand.
implicit,
Don't okay, go ahead.
when I say implicit and when I say explicit, you're thinking of the literal words, the definition, right? And I'm just defining the distinction with those two terms, right?
I think
But
you're equivocating between the two terms, but go ahead.
okay. So the argument, okay, ask me the question again.
Okay, so then how does one maintain that the idea of God is both
hmm
implicit and explicit?
What do you mean by that?
It's very clear because you're saying that so long as the characteristics are similar, one can they can be the idea of God can be referred to be implicit.
The
Then
idea
how
of
is it that
God
is
can
both
be
implicit
similar,
and explicit? Do you
right?
deny? I'll
All
ask it a different way. Boethius, I'll ask it a
okay.
different way. Do you believe that the idea of God it can be explicit? Is an explicit statement?
Yep.
Then how do you maintain that it is also implicit?
Right. So you're thinking of the literal definition. Is that's not what I'm using here?
Then you're using a definition of implicit and explicit that does not exist in any linguistic category at all. This is another fabrication. It's just a form of sophistry.
No, it's not, right?
No,
Because
it's not.
I defined
Dude,
those
this is
terms
very
very
simple
clearly.
SAT level of
I
implicit
define.
and
Can you
explicit
stop
meaning when
interrupting?
it
Can
comes
you
to
stop
the
interrupting?
interpretation of
Can
historical
you stop
text.
interrupting? I define those terms very clearly for you in the concepts of which I am applying those terms to. All it means when I say it's implicit is that I'm referring to how they have similar characteristics, such as the attribute of simplicity, right? They are not made up of parts. They're not composed. They're
So
absolutely simple.
are attributions implied or are those explicit?
They can be both, but in different senses.
Wrong.
No, that's not wrong. It's
It is
both, but
wrong.
in different
Categories,
senses.
Okay, so let me
It's
ask you a more
both, but
fundamental
in
question than
different
this, Boethius.
senses.
Is logic explicit or is it implicit?
What sense do you mean? Like it depends upon the context.
No, it does not. This is
Yes, it
not a
does.
matter of interpretation. This is a
It's
matter of
it's a matter of the
fundamental logic.
context.
Is logic explicit or is
See,
it implied?
as I said, you're using the literal term, which I'm not using for this distinction here,
It's a
right?
pretty
So
clear
you're
question.
no, no, it's not because you're using the terminology with
No,
how
I
it's
think you're looking for a
normatively
life. You're looking
used
for a
within
life
day-to-day
raft.
life, right? But that's not what
No, no,
I'm
no, no,
doing.
no, 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 no. Okay, dude, you're okay. I mean, I hate to. I really hate to criticize you in the
Okay,
way that
okay,
I'm going
let's not
to,
use the word implicit
but
and explicit now. Let me
no,
ask you
no,
a
we have
question.
to stick with it.
Let me ask you
We
a
have to
question.
stick with
No,
it,
we don't.
Boethius.
No, we
No,
don't.
no. Okay,
No, we don't.
dude,
No, we
do
don't.
not move the goalpost. I swear,
We're not shifting the
Boethius, you're better
goalpost.
than this.
We're not shifting the goalpost. I think that you're just a
Boethius,
dishonest
we're not
person.
debating. We're not debate. I do not
N-
want us to debate on this. I want us to develop this together. Okay,
But
I
you're
truly do
well, if you
because
want us to develop us,
I
if
think
you
that
want
what
us to
at
develop
the end
this,
of
then
this,
maybe
at the end
what
of
stop
this, we're actually
interrupting. Stop interrupting. If you want us to develop this, maybe we can share the concepts for the terminology that we're using rather than just equivocating like you're doing because all
no,
you're
no.
doing,
Okay, so
yes,
now you're going to accuse me of
you're
equivocating, and
you're
you can't
applying
answer whether
you're
either the
applying
concept of
okay.
God or
Okay.
either the logos itself is implicit or
Let
explicit.
me denote your issue. The issue is that on whether I'm the categorical distinction that I'm making, you map it on to a scenario where the normative definitions for implicit and explicit are used, right? I'm using those two terms to refer to a specific kind of concept behind them, not a particular
But what I'm
definition
telling you,
per se.
Boethius, my issue
So
with you is
all I'm
that that
saying,
concept doesn't exist.
yes, it does.
You're making it up, just like the people who interpret Vatican II are making it up.
No, those concepts do exist.
That's
They
not
exist
how
within.
logic works, dude.
What? You're not
Okay,
even making
so
coherent arguments in this.
in one sense, right? In our previous conversation, you're trying to bring up the logos spermaticos by what Justin Martyr means by it when he's using it and addressing it.
Yes.
And he's very clear. I went to go read Justin Martyr on this.
He says they partake of the logos.
Second, precisely. So is the
Yes.
logos an explicit or implicit reality?
Define. Well, are you using my concept with those words, or are you using the
No, because
definition?
there is no other concept
Yeah. Yeah. Are you
within
using
rational
those
dialogue for
terms in the
how we
normative
mean
sense?
implicit and explicit.
Are you using that terms
No,
in the
no, no,
normative
dude, you're
sense, or are
gonna
you using
devolve
that in
into a
terms of my
nominalism,
concept?
dude.
This is
You're
not
saying that
nominalism.
so you're claiming that there is a utility in the use of the words and the terms and what they
I'm
signify,
asking
implicit and
you
explicit. That's
I'm
different from the way that
asking
we
you if
conceptually
you
understand it.
okay, so do you understand that we can't like cash this out? If
No,
you're
we can
not
cash
going
it
to
out. We're
tell
gonna cash it out.
if you're not going to
This
if
is
you stop
central.
interrupting,
This is gonna
if
be
you're
central.
not
You know
going
where
to
this is leading.
fucking if you're
Boethius,
not going to tell
You
me
could just
what
concede
you
and say,
mean
you
when
know
you say a
what?
word.
There is no implied sense of the concept of God. You could say that. I'm just giving you an out right now.
I said there's
If you don't
implicit
want to take
worship.
it, I'm giving
Implicit
you an out.
worship. Implicit worship. There's a distinction. That's what I made is that when they say, okay, Paul said they worship the unknown God. In what sense do they worship the unknown God? How can you explain that? Well, in the sense that the characteristics between the two
It's very
beings are
clear in the
similar.
sense that they don't know.
Are they worshiping the same God?
Only in the sense that they don't know that it is
What
God.
is that even? Okay, right. Exactly. And that's what we're saying.
That's not the same
They're
thing as
unaware.
implicit.
They're unaware.
No,
That
that's
that's
not
what that
that.
means.
But here's the thing:
Yes,
Saint
they're
Paul's is not an
unaware.
implicit statement.
That well, one second. He's explicit that it's implicit.
No, that's the thing. There's
Yes.
no such thing.
He's explicit that it's
No,
you
no,
can
no, 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 no,
explicitly say that something
Boethius.
is
You
implicit.
understand the ridiculousness of what you just said.
No, it's not ridiculous. You can
You
explicitly say
literally
something
said
is
it's
implicit.
explicit that it's implicit.
No, I said you can explicitly say that something is implicit.
It's not a thing.
Okay, okay.
An
That is
idea is
implicit.
not. You
That's
see?
an explicit
Do you see
statement.
the problem that you're
Okay.
getting?
Okay,
Just
okay.
you
A
have to throw
is
away the
implicit.
distinction,
That is an explicit
dude. This is all
proposition
post hoc
about something that
rationalization,
is
man.
implicit. Okay. So you don't actually understand the trad cat arguments for Vatican II, and you don't understand when we say that they worship the same God. All we're saying is they worship a
That's
God
not what
that
St.
has
Paul
similar
says.
attributes.
That's not what St. Paul
Bro, my
says.
diga, yes it does.
No,
Yes,
he
bro,
says
100%.
they worship the unknown God.
What does that mean?
It means that they don't know what they worship is something that they don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. They don't know the one true God in the fullest extent or the explicit
Shifting
extent
the
and foundation
goalposts.
of
Shifting
and
the goalposts.
they
But
do not worship
Boethius,
the
Boethius, guess
full
what? Guess
true
what?
God
Guess
in the
what?
revelatory sense.
Boethius, if it is
No,
not
they
known, if
worship the
it's not
same
known to
true
them,
God in
Boethius,
the
if it is not
sense
known
that
to
their God
them,
has
they
similar
can't believe it. They
characteristics.
can't even worship it in the implied sense.
Can you stop interrupting? I said, in the revelatory scheme of things, they do not worship the same true God, right? So a Muslim that doesn't know, that does not know, right, but is still worshiping the one true God because they have similar characteristics in that respect. In another respect, they're not worshiping the one same true God because it's not the God of revelation.
You're
That's
engaged
the
in
entire
sophistry. This is
argument.
sophistry.
Oh my gosh. Okay, by the
This
way,
is 100% sophistry,
come,
dude.
bro, we're talking about Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate. He believes it's not infallible, and he also believes that like V2 is saying that we worship the same God in the fullest extent as the
No,
Muslims.
no, you're pigeonholing again.
No, I'm not.
No, you're presupposing
I'm
that your
literally not.
interpretation is correct. Okay, so
No, I'm
Boethius.
not.
All
No,
right,
I'm
all right.
not. So I'll tell you what
So
I'm
so
doing.
no no
Okay,
no no no.
okay.
Boethius,
What
Boethius,
what was the
Boethius.
first
No,
thing I
we're
said
going
before
back.
engaging?
We're going
What
back,
was the
dude.
first
I've
thing I said
recorded
before
both
engaging?
conversations at this point.
Okay, what was okay, you recorded both conversations. Did you
Yep.
record the part where I said I agree that V2 is analogous,
No no
but
no. Let's
here
not. We're not
but,
talking about V2
but
right now.
stop
No, we're
interrupting.
gonna go
Stop
back,
interrupting.
dude. Boethius. We're gonna go. No no no
Stop
no. You're
interrupting. Stop
interrupting.
interrupting.
We're going back to the
Stop
distinction between
interrupting,
the.
dude. You're
No, you need to
interrupting.
clarify for me
V
the implied and explicit sense.
Oh my
So, is your claim that the concept of
Okay.
God can be understood implicitly?
Yeah.
So the logos is not explicit.
That doesn't follow.
Are you
It
sure
is
you don't want to modify
implied.
that statement?
It is implied that they
Okay.
do
So
in the
the way
sense
in
that
which
they have
Justin
similar
Martyr talks about
characteristics,
the
you
logos
tard.
spermaticos, right?
Oh my god.
Okay, he says this is the sense in which Justin Martyr talks about it.
You don't even
Okay,
know what you're
because he
talking
was he
about.
was explicitly a pagan, right? The logos spermaticos for him refers to rationality or the rational faculty, the logos, the logic that
Reason.
create that
Yeah,
was
I
makes
know.
all
Yeah,
words, right?
I fucking know, dude. I
Because
know.
that is the Greco-Roman context of what that
Okay.
means.
And what does
And
it mean
that,
when he says
hold
there
on,
are seeds?
that
What
is
does he
an
mean when there are
explicit
seeds?
reality, Boethius.
What
It's
does
an
it mean when there are
explicit,
seeds? What
it's
does it
an
mean when there are
explicit
seeds? What does it
attribution.
mean when
See,
there
here's
are
the thing.
seeds? Answer the
If
question.
the foundation, Boethius, the
What
logical
does it
foundation for
mean
all
when there are
categories
seeds
and
of the
all
Okay, he
attributions
just
are
wants to keep interrupting.
explicit, that means that these categories cannot be shared implicitly.
What does it mean when there are seeds of the
Here's
logos?
a
What does that
classical
mean?
example,
What does that
Boethius.
mean? What
Boethius,
does that mean?
Boethius,
What does that mean?
Boethius.
What does that
I can
mean?
imply, one could
Are you
imply,
gonna answer
right,
the
that
question?
Caesar is God
Oh my
by
god. He's not
referring
answering it.
to
Alright, I'm just not gonna
omniproperties.
engage here.
Boethius,
What does it mean
Boethius, don't be
when it
bad faith.
says the
I
seeds of
already
the
prefaced.
logos?
I already
What
prefaced
does
this,
it
right?
mean?
We're developing
What
this
it
together.
No,
We're
we're
not
not
debating.
developing this together when you're constantly interrupting, right?
Dude, you're the
I'm
one that's
asking
interrupting. You
sure
won't
I
even
am.
let me get a word out.
Sure.
You're literally preaching at this point.
What? But
Sure.
Because you no and Boethius, you're just running away from clarifying what you mean by implicit and explicit.
You right, right. Okay. So,
And you're
I'm the one
referring
actually
back to the
cashing this
council
out.
and
I'm the
you're
one
referring
hey,
back
all
to
right, time to
the actual
deafen.
problem of interpretation rather than working through the interpretation.
So actually, no, I'm cashing this out, trying to define our terms, right? And you just want to like
I'm
constantly
the one
interrupt.
that is literally asking you for clarification on what terms you mean.
And when I do clarify, like
Because there had
you
because
don't like the answer.
no. Do you know why, Boethius? Because it's not coherent.
It is. Why
It's
is it
incongruous.
incoherent?
The ways
Explain
in
that. Why
which
is it
you
incoherent?
refer
Why
to
is it
implicit
incoherent?
and explicit
Okay,
are
I'm
not
gonna deafen
congruent
again.
with the
Why
way
is it
that we
incoherent?
understand logical construction, the
Why
form of
is it
logic, and
incoherent?
also our
Why
conclusions
is
from
it
logic.
incoherent? Why is it incoherent? Answer
Okay,
the
so
question.
okay, we're gonna go to the scriptures now.
Why is it incoherent?
We're going to the scriptures
Why?
because you're equivocating between implied
Why
and
is it
explicit sense.
incoherent?
Okay. Why
How? How
is it
am I
that
doing
whenever
so?
I ask you to define to me, right, how it is that God can be both implicit and explicit, you can't
Already
clarify?
did. Already did.
You did not.
I fucking did, dude.
No,
What the
you
hell are you talking?
didn't. Then
Yes, I
okay, if
did.
you did, Boethius, if you did, can
Can
you
you go
explain it?
back in the
Maybe
recording
I'm
2 minutes
stupid.
earlier?
Boethius, maybe I'm stupid. Can you please explain, clarify for me again? How can the concept of God be both implicit and explicit?
Okay, so we're not debating the concept of God. We're debating the worshiping of God,
Okay,
right? So
shifting the goalpost. Shifting the
oh
goalpost. You see, and here's the
no,
problem,
no,
Boethius.
I've been talking
Boethius.
about worship this entire time.
Boethius. There
I've been
is
talking
no
about
distinction
worship
between the
this
worship of God and the
entire
concept
time.
of God.
I have been.
Boethius.
Yes, there is. Yes,
No,
there
there
is.
is not. We're
Yes,
going
there
to the
is.
scriptures now.
All right. All right. You know what? You just want to have a debate. You don't want to cash this out, right?
No, I'm trying to cash it out. You know where this is at. Like, here's the
And when
thing.
I cash it out, you accuse me of like fallacies that I'm
Okay. Now
committing, right?
you're, dude, now you're just bloviating, Boethius. Come
I'm
on, man.
sure.
Stay with me. All right.
You gotta have a
We're
brain,
going to the
bro. You
Bible.
gotta
We're
have a big
going
brain
to
to
the Bible.
understand these things.
We're going to go to the Bible.
You gotta have like a few more brain cells and you'd be able to understand this.
Okay. Now you're just being deriding. Great.
Okay.
Great.
I
Great.
told you how I can say you can
How
implicitly
good
worship
faith
and
of you.
explicitly worship,
All right. We're going to 1
right?
Kings. Hey, if you want to follow along, we're going to 1 Kings verse 16. Let's go.
Like, jeez.
All right. So, we're just going to read this. Would you like to read it? I think you have a
Go ahead.
better voice than I do.
Yeah, it's when Elijah triumphs over the priest of Baal. Yeah, I know this. What about it?
We all know it. Can we go ahead and read it?
Yeah, we all know it. Yeah, he destroys their idols. Right? Everybody
No.
knows it.
Let's read it together slowly.
Right. This is. I'm just gonna explain this by like explicit worship, right? So the Baal priests are
So,
explicit.
according to the Yahweh's right, is there a no? There isn't. Go ahead, continue. Because your
The
claim
Baal
was that now
priests.
you're saying that you're not talking about the concept of God, and you're talking about how their worship is different. Okay, well,
Yes.
what does the scriptures have to say about this?
Well, the argument that I was making, right?
How can you maintain that they have God
Oh.
either
Okay.
in worship,
Fight.
either in
Fight. Let me
orthodoxy
ask
or
you a question.
practice?
Fight.
This is the
Fight.
problem. No,
Fight.
yo,
Do you
stop.
know the
Why are you
difference
appealing to
between
somebody else?
implicit and
Fight. I'm just
explicit
gonna mute you.
worship?
It has nothing to do with you.
Oh my gosh. Come on, dude. You can't mute him like that.
No, you're looking for an escape.
We're
You're looking
talking
for an
about
escape,
we're no, I'm
Boethius.
not. We're
No,
talking
you're looking for
about V2.
no. We're yo. Stay with me, Boethius.
I'm
Stay on this train
literally
of thought.
staying with you and you're not
Would you
being
like to
coherent
read
and you're
one
not being
Kings or
logical and
no?
you're
Would
acting
you?
belligerent. You're
This is
acting
this is
belligerent
amazing,
right now, dude.
Boethius. All right. Would you like so? Listen again. You've made your claims. All right. We're gonna go to the scriptures now. What do the scriptures have to say about difference in the concept of God versus the difference in the worship of God? Right? You know where this is headed, Boethius. And then we're going to talk about what the logos spermaticos, how the logos spermaticos can apply, right? Would you like to read 1 Kings or should I? Boethius. Hello, Boethius. All right, I'll
I'm
read it.
still here.
Okay. So everybody knows that King Ahab, right? The context of this is King Ahab marries Jezebel. Jezebel brings the worship of Baal into the temple, okay? And Obadiah was among the chief priests of the temple at the time of King Ahab. Obadiah was a fearful man of God. Okay, um, which means that he was a devotee of Yahweh. All right. So Obadiah. So verse 16. Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, the troubler of Israel?" Elijah replied, "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commandments, and you have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get two bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God." Then all the people say, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them with sarcasm. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or he's traveling in an implied sense. Maybe he's just sleeping, implied, in an implied sense, or he must be awakened in the implied sense." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed, and they pressed the button on the suicide vest. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the law had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, laid it on the wood, and then he said, "Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Fill the trench with water." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a third time," he ordered, and they did it a third time. The water ran down the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water from the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, Yahweh, he is God. Yahweh, he is God. Adonai, he is God." Then
No.
Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them. Elijah had brought them down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered them there. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is sound of heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees.
Ooh. Oh, I
"Go
want to
and
see
look
that.
towards the sea," he told his servant, and he went up and looked. There is nothing there, he said. 7 times Elijah said, go back. The seventh time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea. So Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot, go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile, the sky grew black and with clouds, and wind rose. The wind rose, a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezebel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah. Tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
That was inspirational, man. I like that. I like when he
That
talks
was
like that.
great.
Oh,
So,
We should just read
Boethius,
scripture all day.
Hmm.
in what sense, right, can you maintain that God is implied has an implied sense of worship?
Right. In the sense that St. Paul says so, right, in the book of Acts of how they worship the unknown God, the pagans, meaning
For
that
sure.
in the sense to where their God has similar characteristics. For example, the Neoplatonists believe that, like, in the one, the simple God. And in respect of those similar characteristics, they do worship the same God in that respect, right? But not the same God in respect to the other
You see,
differences.
here's the
And that's the
thing.
distinction between
I,
implicit and
I
explicit
I would
worship.
be able to agree with you, Boethius, if we were to just leave it at in that sense, but I wouldn't call it the implied sense.
That's all I mean, by the way. If you don't want to call it implied sense, that's fine.
Mhm.
That's all the concept I'm expanding here in a traditional way on how to interpret V2 without it being gay, right?
Like clearly
This
from
is
script, or yeah. The point I'm trying to make, right,
I don't
Boethius,
disagree that V2 is ambiguous. I just think all I'm saying is that there are possible interpretations people will bring up.
Facts.
the point that I'm trying to say is
To the Jews, I became like a Jew.
Elijah, you know, Elijah literally calls the people of Israel out, right? You can't hold two opinions about the God that you worship. So
Right?
I can agree with you, right? That we can talk about the sense in which there are certain categorical references that we can identify as either similar, the same, or even distinct and opposing. But I would never call that sense an implied sense of understanding or knowing God.
All right. Let me
Oh my God, it's the guy who banged his
try and
desk.
simplify it in a sense. So, Abysmal, I was asking you these questions earlier, and I think you were adding on answers that I understand why you added them, but here, do okay. Does our belief have similarities and differences for just any religion? Like, for example,
Of
Islam.
course,
Does it have okay? So it has
no one
similarities.
is denying that the
Okay.
logos, right, the capacity
Mm,
to reason, iterates itself across time and space.
yeah. Right. So in reference to our differences would be for first of all revelatory. That's the first one. Second of all, it would just be our general concept of how we view God being personal or multi-personal or not, right? But in respect to our similarities, they may say that God is simple. Some may say, like Motaridi, Ashari, right? Muslims. All I'm saying is that when someone worships the simple being, the one, in only that sense they are worshiping the same God, right?
So
In
it's
the
a
other
very
sense they are
limited
not.
sense, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we couldn't,
Of course.
so ergo, if it's limited in that private sense, right? In the subjective sense, we could neither hold an implicit or explicit distinction.
Well, all I said was the implicit and explicit distinction was those different
It
concepts.
isn't though. That's the
No,
thing.
okay. That is the terminology I was using for the two
I
categories,
understand.
the
So
two different concepts.
wouldn't you agree then that those categories or way of explaining
Whoa!
makes our understanding of the senses in which one could have shared characteristics
It
between
can
one
if you're using
conception
the
of
literal
God versus
definitions.
another, wouldn't you agree that it makes it more ambiguous?
If you're using the literal definitions, yeah. But if I define my concept that I'm
Right, but when
making,
we're talking about the logos spermaticos and how it operates in that implied and explicit sense, wouldn't you agree that it's probably more uh yeah more rigorous to maintain the sense of implicit and explicit
no.
as it
I
relates
think
to the
it.
logos
I think it's
rather
the
than
traditional
rather
understanding of
hold on
things.
rather than opinion on worship?
So I was actually giving an opinion on worship the entire time. That's all I was doing. Because we were talking about
But
whether
can you yeah, but
Muslims worship the
can you
same
still
God as
amend
us or
my
not.
position? No.
Yeah, you believe I'm equivocating between the
No,
terms.
that's not my position. I'm asking you to
You
steal
just
my
said it was your
previous
position
position.
earlier, dude. You fucking said it
What do you
earlier.
believe? What do you believe my
You have a
position would be on
recording. You
this?
go back in the recording. Let's show you. You said it. Your position was that I was equivocating between the two terms of implicit and explicit. Well, I told you that I told you that those two terms
We don't
refer
have to
to
revisit
two
my
distinct
criticism. What's my
concepts.
position now after just like the past like paragraph that we were just
Well, it's confusing what your position is because it's not coming to an agreement.
No, so I mean
He
I've
thinks
tried to
Vatican
clarify
II has
multiple times.
weaponized the
I
I think
I've
Vatican II
tried to
is
clarify.
weaponized. I don't disagree with that.
That's my claim, right? But that's
ambiguity.
not the same thing as my
I
position.
believe it's
My
ambiguous.
position
That's my
my
claim.
position my position was that you can't maintain an implicit or explicit distinction as it relates to what you are saying is the worship
As
of
it relates to
God.
the terms, not the concepts. Yeah. So the concepts,
So,
which those terms were representing in the sense that I was making, it would make sense. But in the terms
but
themselves,
again,
no.
couldn't you say, right, that to maintain the implied and explicit the implicit and explicit distinction when it comes to application of logos spermaticos is more crucial or rigorous than to apply it in the sense of an
It's
opinion between two
terminology
different
that
forms
can
of
help
worship,
us, like help me
right?
speak, right, and of these concepts better. Because every time I explain something to you, I don't have to explain like the concept itself. I just have a term that refers to the concept.
Well, couldn't you see why from my perspective, it's important to keep us from equivocating between
But
these
one
terms,
second. But that's why
especially
I
in
define the
virtue of
concepts.
Scripture, right? But especially in virtue of Scripture,
That's why
where
I
we
gave you the
do
concepts.
have, right, scriptural cases where the same or similar question was asked on the difference between
Abysmo,
holding two different
you were
opinions of
too
worship.
busy interrupting me while I was giving you the argument earlier. When I first gave the argument, you can go back on your recording, right? The argument that I gave you,
Boethius,
I
okay,
told you
go
explicitly,
ahead.
no pun intended, right? What I meant by those terms and the concepts they apply to, and that the literal meaning of those terms was not actually being used here, and that they were just referring to specific concepts on the differences in worship. Literally, all it referred to was in some way they different, in some way they not different. That's all I was saying.
So here's the thing. First of all, there is no pun intended because it is not a pun to claim that you said specific things explicitly.
Oh my gosh.
Okay?
Well, explicitly
Because
was a pun
that's
because
how
it,
we
it was
use
about implicit
logic.
explicit
I'm not
distinction.
saying that you don't understand what logic is because we're talking about the distinction or differences in the way that we're going to use the two specific terms, explicit and implicit, where my position is you can only use them in a particular way.
Let
Okay?
me ask you this question: would you
Now, secondly,
agree?
hold on, Boethius.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question now, right? Since,
Okay.
okay. So, do you believe that in First Kings chapter 18, do you believe that the Jews or the Israelite or the Yahwists and Baal were their worships explicit or were they implicit worships?
Explicit.
So that clarifies it, right?
Yep. That's why the distinction matters, because they implicitly they could have been, right? explicitly on
Nope.
the other
There's
hand.
no there there.
Yes.
Nope.
Yep. Yep.
There's no there
Yep.
there.
Yep.
They don't. They no. Their
Okay,
worship.
let me ask you a
They can't. You
question
can't
just
hold
to
two
end this
opinions.
entire
No.
discussion. What
Literally,
did you say?
this is the case
Okay,
where
if you're gonna keep
it's
interrupting, I'm gonna
literally a
deafen. All right.
showdown between the God of Abraham and Baal.
Are you done interrupting? Okay, good.
Dude,
So
it's
the
literally a
argument,
showdown between the God of
all right.
Abraham and Baal.
Okay, maybe if you let me make the argument instead of interrupting. Listen, I want this conversation to end, and the only thing we've got. Okay, apart from the terms explicit and implicit, do you agree with my argument earlier from similarity and dissimilarity in the limited sense of worship?
Yes, that's
They
why I
were
didn't want to. That's why
okay.
I prefaced right at the beginning. We're not
Arguments
debating
over. You
boethius. We're not.
conceded.
Yeah. We're not debating. We're trying to
That's a
develop
concession.
our understanding. Okay,
That's a
and that's
concession.
that. No, it's not a concession.
It's a concession of the fucking concepts that I was arguing with the terms.
Well,
Yes,
that's the
that's a
thing. I
concession.
never had an issue. I never had an issue with talking about shared categories between conceptions of God. And you're right. These are going to be conceptual distinctions that are made explicitly. They are not made implicitly.
Okay, how about that? That's
You see?
fine.
Yep.
So what?
So now that we're talking about the similarity and distinctions between conceptions of God, they are explicit in their references.
Okay,
And if
apart
they
from the two
start to make
terminologies I just fucking expedited, those two
if explicit
terms have been
hold on,
expedited from the
but
conversation.
if the
Expedited. Completely
explicit
gone.
categories,
Oh
attributions,
my
whatever we want
gosh,
to
I'm
call them,
deafening.
references, start to make implicit
Stop using the
statements,
terms that we
right?
expedited, dude.
Okay, all right.
I expedited those terms for the discussion. All we're saying now is, do we worship the same God in the limited, extremely tiny, minuscule, limited sense
We
that
couldn't
they
say
have
that at all.
seen,
That's precisely what I'm saying.
that they have? Can
You
you
can't
stop
take an
interrupting? Stop
explicit sense
interrupting.
of God
Stop
and
interrupting.
apply it
Stop fucking
implicitly. We
interrupting,
cannot
dude.
do
You're
this.
such a
You know
bitch.
this, Boethius. You know
Stop
that we cannot.
interrupting.
You
Oh
know that
my
we
God.
cannot. They
Okay.
have
Okay.
the
Listen.
logos, which comes from
I'm
God.
deafened. I'm deafened.
They have the logos, which comes from God, which implies
So
that they are of God, but that
in what
doesn't mean
sense do they
that they
worship
worship
the
the
same
same
God?
God. And if they don't worship the
Oh,
same God, they don't follow the same God.
Jigaboo, are you listening? Okay, I made a very clear argument. I said, and you actually agree with the concepts earlier, so you already conceded. I don't know what you're saying. But my argument was we worship the same God in reference to the similarities, but in reference to the dissimilarities, right?
Which
The
are all
differences
explicit
in
statements.
in
It's all explicit. There's
no
no implied of sense
explicit,
of
no
what you're talking
BS,
about,
no
Boethius. There
terminology,
is no
no
implied sense of what you're
terminology.
talking about because the
See,
similarities and differences
you're
we've
backpedaling.
already
You're
agreed, right?
backpedaling,
That they're
bro.
all
You're
explicit.
backpedaling. You're backpedaling. You're backpedaling. Because I told you to
Logic
expedite
is
those terms.
explicit,
Expedite those
Boethius.
terms.
The
Expedite those terms.
logos
Expedite
spermaticos is
those terms.
iterated in the explicit sense. We
Bro.
can only confirm
Okay.
the logos
Tell me if you're gay.
spermaticos in other religions and faiths
If you're homosexual.
explicitly. We cannot do it implicitly.
All right. Okay. So, confirmed homo here. Right. Kept talking. So
Vatican
you
II
don't
has a huge intellectual error in Lumen Gentium 16.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you don't have an argument, right? All you have is like rhetoric and like interrupting constantly and backpedaling, right? And bloviating. That's all you have. Because I made the argument is that they worship the same God only in that respect to where they worship the same God that has the
Which
similarities.
would be
In,
explicit and not
can you
implicit.
shut up? But
You couldn't say
in
that they.
respect to the okay, I'm just gonna overtalk you. But in respect to the differences, we absolutely do not. That was my argument. That's why St. Paul says in Acts 17, they worship the unknown God. Whoa. That's how we explain what he said. Shit.
Yeah, dude, to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews, right? So to the
So,
Muslims, I became like a Muslim to win
so
the
So you
now
stole
we're
Muslims.
gonna
money?
go to the Lumen.
That's
Right.
scriptural.
So now that we've cleared this up, okay, boethius, so because
I'm done. I think it's over. It's done.
we agree in that sense, right? And
Wait, wait,
from
wait.
our
We didn't
prior
agree in what sense?
conversations and earlier conversation today, I hope you could understand why it was at least important from my perspective to maintain the rigor of implied and explicit,
Well, no,
senses for
no,
particular
no, 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 no. I
for that
understand
particular
it.
case. But
I
I
understand
understand
it
where
if you're
you're coming
slow.
from, and I agree with you. Okay,
Oh, wait, wait. All
I
right.
agree
Confession.
with you in the sense that we can talk about similarities in attributions, categories, concepts as a concept of God. Okay. But that's going to be something that we logically, explicitly demonstrate, and not something that we can just say exists per se within the quote unquote worshiper.
Right, right. But I explained to you 10 different times at the beginning of our conversation. I hope you recorded it because you'll go back and watch it and look at how stupid
Why does it keep
what you said
saying that?
was. Because
They're
I
not.
I told you what those terms meant in the concepts that I was using for those two categories to be able to make the conversation a little bit more easier for me so I didn't have to explain the concept every time I was speaking about it. Okay? But at least I got a concession on the concept side of things, right? I don't give a
Correct.
shit about the
We
terms.
agree. Okay. So now we're going to go to Lumen Gentium
Semantics.
16, right? The
Pretty
most
base.
contested part of this, okay? But the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. In the first place, amongst these, there are the Muslims who, professing to hold the faith of Abraham, along with us, adore the one and merciful God,
All right, right. Can you read the
who
rest
on
of
the
it now?
last day will judge mankind.
Well, dude, the Father and Son
Nor,
are
hold on,
one.
Trez, nor is God far distant for those who
It's the
in
same filioque
shadows and
argument.
Shut up,
images
shut up, shut up, shut up,
seek
Trez. Shut up, Trez. Abysmal.
seek the
Repeat that statement.
unknown
Repeat that
God.
statement. Repeat that statement.
For
Just
it,
repeat that sentence. Repeat it.
which sentence?
Far
It's a
distant, far
pretty long
distant, far
conjunction that they're
distant,
making.
far distant, far distant.
Uh,
Repeat from there.
Nor is God far distant for from those who in shadows and images seek the unknown God, St. Paul. For it is he who gives to all men life and breath and all things, and as Savior wills that all men be saved.
So when it says they adored the one true
Correct.
God,
Now this is the
when it
problem.
no, no, it's not because when it says they adore the one true God, what do they quote right after? The unknown God. They're meaning it in the sense that Paul meant it, which was invincible ignorance. Wow, interesting.
But this
So
is the problem, right?
it's
Then
not a
it's not the
problem
faith of
because it
then it's not
supports
the
my
faith of
concept.
Abraham. Boethius, then it's not the faith of Abraham.
Right?
I'm
Okay.
very aware of right of that
Whatever,
interpretation and reading
whatever.
of
We're
it.
done. We're
But
done with
here's the
this.
problem
We're
then,
done.
right?
We're
Now do
we're
you see
absolutely done.
this
We've
is the
been doing this for
ambiguity of it.
hours.
Then this becomes a problem, but it's not the faith of Abraham then.
I never said it wasn't
If
ambiguous.
it's just
The
an
first thing I
adoration
said,
in the
oh my
shadows and
god.
images
The
for the
first
unknown God,
thing I said
this is the kind
about
of
V2,
casuistry. This is the kind of casuistry. You see, this is not. I'm not
this is the
saying that
kind of
this is your
sophistry
fault.
that you're doing.
No, no, no.
This
This is
is
the kind of casuistry that was present at the Vatican II Council and the Church Fathers at that council that wrote this really this underhanded shit.
I
You
never
can't
disagreed that it
maintain
was
right, right,
ambiguous.
right.
That was one of
I
the
know.
first
We
statements I
agree on
made.
this, right? Because right, this is
Yes,
the crux of the
V2 has
problem.
been
It
weaponized. It's
cannot.
heavily ambiguous. There's like 20
If it's
different
in the
No,
case,
interpretations.
right?
it's not weaponized ambiguity.
If it's in the sense, right? If to adore the one and merciful God is in the sense that we both agree to now, it can't be in the sense that they are professing to hold the same faith in Abraham. But it's written as a conjunctive, as a conjunction. It's a run-on statement of nonsense, basically. This
You know,
whole
it's funny.
sentence
There has to
is
be
is
Catholic
ambiguous.
versus Catholic debates. I guess the Pope didn't solve much of anything.
Oh, ouch. I
That
I'm
felt
just
that
saying
one.
these like huge papal claims about how he preserves unity when there's like tons of Catholic infighting. Like
Well, he's letting us debate. He's leaving it to the
the
laity. It's the same reason, he
the
said
the
not.
RCs want to say, oh, the Orthodox are just so ununified and they don't have a unified belief. Look at the fucking Catholics having like 20 different interpretations of V2. I mean, come on, bro.
Yeah, but when Catholics debate, we just split hairs. We're not like
Yeah, that's
anathematizing each other.
this was to me this was not a debate. We were kind of developing this together
But I love splitting
because
hairs
I
and
already
being
know
like
Boethius and
trivial
I agree on the
and petty.
conclusions when it comes to the interpretation of Vatican II, especially in these ambiguous parts. It's kind of like I I wanted to engage with Boethius because he's an intellectual, and to me I wanted to understand the process of it and the logical construction of it, the dialectic. So I hope no, yeah. So that's what I got out of it. Is it wasn't a debate.
Nice.
So
Listen, Rome has spoken. The case is closed. You're subject to veto.
I
well,
mean,
no,
it's
well,
like a
so
synod level
we are
council,
bound to
really.
veto. I mean, I'm just saying stuff that you already agree with Boethius, but we're bound to it with docility and sincerity, which I believe our conversation and are trying to take Lumen Gentium 16 seriously, and we're trying to assess it and understand it together. That meets the criterion of binding by docility and sincerity. Because I think we've treated it as docile and sincere as we can, but it's still prone to error. Having done that together, it's still in error.
Trez, V2 is binding, though. You can't deny that.
Binding. Define binding.
Meaning that your conscience is subject to what it teaches.
No, it means that they like St. Paul is very so this is on uh dude, we already went over this on the whole liturgy debate, right? Father
Oh
Robert
yeah, the
Barron's
whole
FAQ.
liturgy debate of whether like Novus Ordo was a part of the Roman Rite or it's a new rite, or is it just a form of the rite? Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
But
I mean,
so Bishop Robert
Hey,
Barron's
fight. I have a question for fight. He's here.
so
um,
Okay, or Trez.
like
Okay,
some canons
Trez.
are wrong sometimes, and if later we find out that Lumen Gentium was wrong, I'll own
I
it.
don't
But for now,
disagree. I don't disagree. I think it
there's
can
no
be
sin in
abrogated. I
believing it.
think it should. I think it ought to
Yeah,
be abrogated. But
and it might be, sure.
Trez, you understand, right? Like, okay, okay. Is is um is Novus Ordo a
so go ahead.
form of the Roman Rite, or is it a new rite apart from the Roman Rite?
Right.
Um, well, everyone's doing the mass in their own tongue, so
It doesn't
yeah.
answer the question.
I mean, if Indians are doing Novus Ordo, then it wouldn't. I guess
So
they're
is
Latin,
it
right, as well.
so they're Roman Rite?
I don't know. Is the Eastern Rite doing mass in their language?
No, no. So
I,
this
I,
okay,
I,
okay,
I
okay,
haven't studied the other rites. I'm sorry.
okay.
I'm like
So
pure
no, no, no,
Roman.
no, no, no. The two
So
rites, right? Novus Ordo and TLM. Are they two forms of the same rite, or are they different rites?
PLM versus Novus Ordo.
Yes. Are they different rites or two forms of the same rite?
The rite. What do you mean rite? Like Eastern rite? Like Latin rite? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are they different? Right? Is okay. Is TLM a different rite from Novus Ordo, or is it just different forms of the same rite?
Well, a rite means you have your own tradition. You have your own liturgy. Is it a different liturgy? Yes. If
Oh,
so
that's
so
what
it's a
you
different
mean.
rite.
If you're saying liturgy means rite, then yeah, it's a different liturgy.
So it's not the Roman rite.
Yeah,
so
sure.
here's the
According to
thing.
your definition, yeah.
So real quick, yeah, Fatbo, I'll let me in a sec. So just to clarify, right, when it comes to binding, right, Bishop Barron clarified he makes an extra distinction as from the CCC, religious assent, which, though distinct from the assent of faith, is nonetheless an extension of it. That's still not a justification, just so you know. But I'm just pointing out he's making a distinction here. And what Saint Paul the Sixth said himself, the council has invested its teachings with the authority of the supreme ordinary magisterium, which ordinary magisterium is so obviously authentic that it must be accepted with docility and sincerity by all the faithful, according to the mind of the council, as expressed in the nature and aims of the individual documents. But this does not mean that it can't be intellectually inerrant.
Right, but doesn't like I believe Pope Francis says that they're the same right, just different forms. The extraordinary form
Yeah, he
would
doesn't say
be.
that explicitly. He's implying it by it's a
Wasn't
unique
it
expression
the
of the
Pope
Roman
before
right.
him in the 2000s, I believe 2008?
2000, no, yeah, Pope Benedict. We went over this in our conversation last time.
Yeah, yeah.
That becomes a problem though, is Pope Benedict did interpret it in a way that isn't coherent with the conciliar documents itself, because the conciliar documents are literally in Sacrosanctum Concilium, it's literally calling for a new rite. And then when Pope Paul institutes the Novus Ordo, he refers to those specific passages in Sacrosanctum Concilium where it literally says new rite. It's calling for a new rite.
Time to be an SSPX, bro.
So again, it's Missa Romanum, okay?
Yeah, just do SSPX. Honestly, it'll solve. It'll
The
clear this whole thing up.
Here's the Missa Romanum, and here's the quote, okay?
Oral Cosmore issues about papal authority.
Nah,
The
man, I'm
recent second
SSPX. There is no
Your SSPX?
anathema. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. There's no schism.
There's none?
No. Pope
And you
Francis
deny
said
and
so
you deny
himself.
Summa V2?
Um, I think it's ambiguous, but I'm not gonna
I
say weaponized.
doesn't don't you think that doesn't the SSPX think that the V2 is like not a
They
not
would
totally
argue
valid?
weaponized, sure,
Okay, right.
but Lefebvre didn't say that. That's kind of a SSPX,
That's not really
like
true.
the later
Levet,
developments.
the founder, claimed that Novus Ordo wasn't the Roman rite.
Yeah, okay.
So Pope Francis allows SSPX to be in valid communion.
The Francis did, yeah.
So their status
That
of
might be
schism was lifted, but they have limited jurisdiction of the sacraments. So most recently, they've allowed the SSPX Eucharist and confession, but not jurisdiction
Based.
over their marriages. Their marriages still have to be approved by the local ordinary.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna
That
be
sucks.
SSPX. I mean, all of
Yeah,
these issues can be solved, right? I mean, the
literally.
TLMs are good near me, but the SSPX, I was either gonna be FSSP or SSPX, but
Oh, not SSPV, please.
no, not
For SSPX.
no.
Okay, thank you.
Or I was gonna do TLM, SSPX, or FSP.
Or become a sit of a contest.
No,
I'm
dude.
just kidding, I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's the worst.
So Trez, here's what sparked today's conversation. Sam Shimon put a video out today. He literally, I mean, yeah, he obliterates any sense that you could maintain that that the belief in Allah is the same as the belief in the Jewish God. And he does it both from scripture and from the Muslim sources and archaeology as well. So
Sure, but like most
Psalm
Christians
83.
don't read the Bible and most Muslims don't read the Quran. So, like using these definitions that are like
Right. So
hyper
I mean
specific to the
we can
text
talk about being on
isn't
friendly terms
a
with
majority of
Muslims, right, in a
believers.
practical sense, but we wouldn't be able to say that in any formal sense. So ergo, Lumen Gentium that needs to go. That or just that if they just remove that sentence, it's fine.
if you can prove that without a
But
benefit of the
if
doubt,
but
like,
that's the thing. As soon as they
and
revise or
bishops
remove that
agreed, like,
statement, they have to admit that the conciliar documents can be prone to error.
if yeah, no, if later the Pope is like, nah, we're going back and we're getting rid of Lumen Gentium, or that one sentence in Lumen Gentium, I would be totally okay with it. I'll
The
give you that.
problem is this, like Trez, I'm okay with both papal statements, whether by himself or through an ecumenical council, can be infallible only if they are declared as infallible teaching. Like they literally have to say, we are defining this infallibly.
Of
Then we
course.
can consider that particular statement, proposition, or whatever you want to call it, as infallible. But just to say that in virtue of the fact that you have an ecumenical council that is not infallible in character, yet teaching with the ordinary magisterium, that we're just supposed to assume that it's infallible, it's not binding in the same infallible way.
Yeah, agree. I mean, the Pope at the time said so himself. He was like, guys, this is not infallible.
But can you see in the way that they try to post hoc rationalize the character of Vatican II, it leaves people with the implication that it is just as infallible? So wouldn't it be wrong of
No,
them to allow that ambiguity to persist?
Most RCs do not
no,
like me
it's
for
not
wanting to be
true.
SSPX though, Trez. They
Um,
seem to get a lot of hate.
really? No one's ever
Yeah.
given me S word
It's
for
because you don't.
SSPX.
It's because you're not really that vocal
It's
about
because
it.
I'm not anti Novus Ordo. Like, I
I,
don't
right,
think there
but
has
like
to be a rift. Though.
I've asked like other RCs like
Like, I
what if
like
I be
NO.
SSPX and they're like no, you should never do that. Like they're wackos, weirdos. You know, it's I've seen a
It's
lot of
because a
hate.
lot of SSPX guys will anathematize you for being Novus Ordo and go so far as to say Novus Ordo is invalid and going to Novus Ordo Mass doesn't even count at all. And that there's a lot of SSPX guys that will go that far. And I don't think that's in I don't think Lefebvre said that. And I think that's just kind of
He said it
the
was valid, but it wasn't the Roman rite. Yeah.
okay, sure, I agree with that. But the laity of SSPX is like pretty hardcore. They're just zealot. And I mean, I respect that, but it's gonna cause like people to get upset, you know? Like zealots piss people off. And that's why like SSPX like gets hate, I think, even though they're correct. And I mean, you can still do confession and you can still do mass there. So I don't see, I personally don't see the issue. It's the set of Vacantists that go too far, where they just straight up deny the Pope. That's the problem. Like we can debate about all these other things. That's
They don't
fine.
they don't deny the Pope, or excuse me, the sedes do. The SSB doesn't. My bad.
Not SSPX. Yeah, they don't. That's the good thing about them. And that's
The
the big
sedes
difference
do.
between SETIs and SSPX. But then there's like a blurry line between SETIs and SSPX.
The
And
SSPX rejects them.
I think, oh yes, of
Yeah,
course. But I'm saying that the SETIs will
but
like leech on to SSPX
yeah. You're right, right,
and
right,
hang
right.
out in
That's
their
the sede
circles.
argument. Is that
Yeah.
they're saying that you can't maintain that they are valid popes if there are errors. So they take the Bellarmine's opinion that literally as soon as a pope is a manifest heretic, he loses his office, regardless of whether or not a council declares it as such or not. That's
Mm,
the sede position. That's
yeah,
not my
it is.
position. My position is that yes, a pope can be a manifest heretic, but he's still the pope. It's just something we have to live with.
Okay, base. Yeah, it's not even SETI privationist. That's just straight up Catholic. Okay, I'm cool with that. It's just the SETIs really upset me, to be honest. But I don't see any issues with SSPX, and I don't see a rift between SSPX and Novus Ordo. And I don't see any heresy in Vatican II. Maybe it's ambiguous, but I think it's due
Yeah,
to
no. Yeah,
ignorance,
I don't
not
see
due to
any heresy in
weaponization.
Vatican II. It's just It's ambiguous, and there are mistakes in it.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll go
So
with mistakes,
ergo,
but
it is not infallible. The documents themselves are not infallible.
as long as you're taking it seriously, right? That's what religious assent you guys were talking about earlier versus faithful assent. So as long as you're taking it seriously and you actually think about it and then you're like, "Nah, I don't believe it." That's fine, but you have to actually contend with it is the thing. And some people just, you know, they just like hand wave it off. And I think that's the problem. You know, it's like being, "Oh yeah, the Council of Hippo, who cares?" It's like, "Oh, just because it wasn't like ecumenical doesn't mean that it doesn't matter." And like, yeah, Vatican II was not like a high-ranking council, sure, but and especially over time. See, that's where I disagree. Is I think over time Vatican II has lessened in its effects. It was big when it started, but now there's so much criticism about it, and it's rightfully
Yeah, I think
so.
I think the Council Fathers and that whole generation were just arrogant.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's when that was like right before the,
They thought
whole
they knew when
scandal
they didn't.
happened. Yeah.
They were
I
just like
think they were
Judas.
ignorant. Yeah, they definitely were. And they were like fraternizing with Protestants and Muslims clearly. It was too modernist for sure. It lost the traditional edge that Vatican One had. It's such a stark difference between Vatican One and Vatican Two, which is really weird. How so quickly it could go from like trad to modernist.
There were some good things that were leading. So Vatican II was already planned at that closing of Vatican One. So
Hmm.
they knew they had to, because of the historical circumstances and because the schema of Vatican One had already established the schema leading up to Vatican II. So they were part of the schema within Vatican One that they couldn't address. And so the schema was incomplete, which is why they called it Vatican II. And they had a working schema for the next council to finish it off because Vatican One closed early, and then that schema got corrupted.
Damn.
It got
That's
subverted.
sad, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, it included, so there is a there was a lot of liturgical science leading up to it that was coming from the Benedictine monasteries, and they were good because here's what their intent was. The liturgical scholars amongst the Benedictines, they like the way that they do the liturgy, they were doing the liturgy in the monasteries was much more full than what was going on even in the Tridentine Rite. Like they were using more Gregorian chants than the normal people were, than the ordinary mass was. They were using incense a lot more often. I don't know if you've ever been to a Benedictine monastery in their mass, like their
I
traditional
haven't.
form. Their
I've only
traditional
done
form of the
TLM.
mass was much more elaborate than the Tridentine Rite.
Huh?
Yeah, and it was longer too. They included their form.
Benedictine?
Yeah, because what they'll do is depending on
Better
when
than
they have
TLM?
mass. Yeah, because it's good because they're doing the breviary at the same time. So what they'll do is they'll go from Compline right into the mass, the daily mass that they do, and then exit out with the like mid-afternoon prayer, and then they'll do the noon office, liturgy of the hours, and they would include that as part of their whole liturgical structure. And that's what they wanted, more of that to be shared, because in the monastic setting at the time there was more scripture that was being prayed over within the liturgical formula. So that was the premise of doing liturgical reforms, because from their perspective you can anyways, one of their leading liturgical scholars at the time, those were the arguments that he was making, but he was presupposing the practices that were happening at that time in the Benedictine monasteries. So when he's talking about reforming and adding and including Gregorian chants and all of this that show up in Sacrosanctum Sanctum Concilium, like that's what he meant. But that's not what we got with the Novus Ordo. they removed everything.
Um, I think that Novus Ordo is way too long and it's full of fluff. So
Novus
you're
Ordo is
saying
too
Benedict?
long.
No, I think that it's filled. It's like filler. I'm saying it's not that it's long. It's just longer arbitrarily. So what I like about TLM is that it's just straight to the point. It's Jesus, bro. It's Jesus. And I don't see what I don't. I've never done the Benedictine, so I'm just having a hard time understanding uh what
Like
makes Benedictine liturgy so distinct.
the Benedictine, at the time, the
I've
Benedictine
only done
monks
NO
nowadays,
and
they've
TLM.
already adapted to the Novus Ordo. But when the whole church was doing the Tridentine rite, the way that the monastics were practicing it was obviously much more full, and they had access to much more Gregorian chant and stuff. But the reason why I agree with their intention, right, to bring that fullness into the existing Roman rite at the time, which was only the Tridentine rite, I believe it was justified because the way the Tridentine rite had kind of like in the in the ordinary church, like it was, so it got to a point, Trez, where like do you remember like hearing about side altars and stuff, where
No,
so
that's wild.
it got
Two
to the point
altars.
where when we had more priests, Trez, like some churches, especially the cathedral church, would have side altars, and the reason for that is because you would have multiple masses going on all throughout the day, and it would
Hmm.
just be a priest by
Oh no,
himself
I've
just
seen
doing
that.
the
I've seen
mass.
that in
Yeah,
Mexico City. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And they would do it, it would take them like 30 minutes. So a lot of the priests, they're just going blah, 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 and they're just zipping through it, right? Because they're just praying to themselves.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so it had kind of gotten to that point, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
but that's good because there's fervor for Catholicism. Like people want to be Catholic. There's so
so
many
the idea
people
of
that you have to
making,
have two masses.
yeah, but the idea of making the liturgy more accessible to people is not an unfounded criticism. Like, I agree with that, right? But the way the Benedictines meant it was their intention was really, we want to provide the people and include them within the fullness of the tradition. But
Yeah.
then what happened at Vatican II is they started adding, oh, call for a new rite. We want a new rite. And they kept saying that over and over. If you read Sacrosanctum Concilium, that's all they're talking about. They're like, we need a new rite for this, a new rite for that, a new rite for this.
New liturgy is new, right? Is what you're saying?
And that's what's confusing. Is it a new rite? See, what happens is this I posted you two videos, okay? Because I don't want to revisit this too much. Because this
Well,
is a
then what about
conversation that me and
Benedictine
Bo.
liturgy and Tridentine liturgy?
So yeah. So
Are
just
those
just
different
watch those
rites?
videos. I know they're long, dude. Just like while you're working out, because I do want to talk to you about this one. Because I think this is something that me and you can examine. Because I know like we've had our disagreements. You know what I mean? In the way that I articulate things sometimes. You see what I
Same,
mean?
same. No,
So
it's all
like,
good.
so here's what happened,
Done the
right?
same.
Just the plot is, um, I got an argument with Abby Eaplord
Oh yeah,
because
okay.
somehow we started talking about like the liturgy and stuff, okay? And then she was like, "Well, I've been taught that it's the same Roman rite. It's just two different forms, the extraordinary and I was like, "Yeah, I understand that people say that, but it's not the same rite because that's how I was taught, right? Which was read the conciliar documents and follow the council documents. And when I follow the council documents, it's literally that's how we were taught in how to read the council documents basically. Like when we're going through liturgy class, like we start with Sacrosanctum Concilium and then we go to Missal Romanum. And then we study the germ or the general instruction for the Roman Missal.
Nice. Okay. I like
So
it.
so for me, I was still like, dude, there it's literally a different liturgy. That's why like you're taught in the liturgy course, like you don't mix the tridentine, the extraordinary form and the ordinary form at all.
Hmm.
Because they're materially separate, distinct as well.
Yeah, yeah, I get
There's
it.
some
Yeah, yeah.
elements that right that so it's not just a matter that materially they're distinct, they're also formally distinct. That's how we were taught,
Mm.
which is why you can't mix them. So if they're not formally the same, that's what Benedict says in Summorum Pontificum, then they can't be the same right. Do you see the problem now? So Pope Benedict in Summorum Pontificum, he contradicts himself in his own document.
Oh, Benedict.
Yeah.
Whoa. Hey, man. He's trad.
No, because hold on, I gotta take this call.